that powerful framework has helped me steer clear from trying to just like total writer's block and perfectionism, trying to figure out, oh, if I need the correct analogy in this verse, you know, or like, oh, this pre-chorus lacks a certain bit of illustration, or I'm not rhyming in my chorus, you know, like, I don't know, like we can get down super, I think, stupid rabbit holes. Are you kidding me? You're not writing a song because you can't figure out what rhymes with shark? Welcome back to yet another awesome power-filled episode of the Prolific Super Producer Podcast. Hey, what's a super producer? Well, let me tell you, a super producer is kind of an older term, but it's really just for somebody that is a super producer, meaning they wear all hats, right? From inception of the idea. They have the ability and the skills to not only come up with an idea, come up with lyrics, come up with a melody to support the lyric, put all that to some music that sounds dope, produce it so it sounds even fuller, and then mix and master it so it sounds professional and can go wherever you want it to go. You have the ability to do all of this. And in today's day and age, it has never been easier to do this from quite literally your bedroom. So that's what we're talking about. To be the prolific super producer, we want to equip you and inspire you with anything and everything you need to be able to do this stuff. Why? Well, because we know what it's like to kind of do this alone, and we don't want you to have to do it alone. And we also just actually believe your artistry matters and your music matters, and it's worth pursuing. If you got that thing inside of you, if you light up whenever you hear a good song, if you light up making your own songs, yeah, you've got the bug, and we want to help you. Okay, so we're kind of talking about the 6 steps to create a song from scratch, right? And this is part 1, because there's a good bit to cover here. And this is why it's Tyson and I, okay? So Tyson is a full-on artist himself, but he specializes in the kind of the back end, right? Near the end of the process, mixing, mastering, preparing it for distribution. I'm a full-on artist too. I'm more like the front end, right? I can talk a lot about lyrics and melody and writing songs from a songwriting perspective, but there's a lot of crossover between both him and I. So we thought, hey, let's put our heads together, put something that's really valuable together for people so you can get a good dose of the full spectrum. Because while maybe you've made songs before, you might feel a little iffy when it comes to your melodies. I don't know. You're like, yeah, when it comes to the melody stuff, I don't really get that. The mixing, I love when I get to mixing, but melody is just kind of freaking me out. Or it's reversed. You're like, I can come up with chords all day long. I got vibes for days, but I don't know how to take it and develop it. What's production? What's this production stuff, you know? So wherever you find yourself, we hope these 2 episodes back to back will be powerful for you and to equip you right out the gate. If you are just struggling with any of those parts that I talked about and you just want to find a way to be able to pump out more songs, you're feeling a little bit stale in your workflow, we've got a guide that is completely free for you to check out. If you go to finishsongsguide.com, it's a guide that's free that will help you finish songs, okay? It's a simple 5-step process to walk you through from the very beginning all the way to the very end. And one of my very favorite ways to use this guide, use this workflow, is if you've got ideas, but you're struggling to finish them, it's awesome. You just plug your song in, you plug your demo into whatever step you're on, and then you just pick up with step 3, 4, or 5 or whatever. And it's gonna help you get more songs out, and getting more songs out just means more practice. More practice means you're getting better. All that compound effect is so real, and I think that'll help you out with that. Man, here we go.
So today we're going to be diving into, as Nathan already mentioned, production, songwriting, recording, all of that good stuff. This is going to be primarily leaning towards Nathan's specialty, but I also have a lot of experience doing these things as well, so I'll kind of chime in here where it's relevant. But to kind of set this all up for us, I want to talk about the music production pyramid. Unfortunately, because this is audio only, I don't have a visual for you, unless you're watching on YouTube, in which case you can just watch me with my arms here building this pyramid. To build a pyramid, you need layers of foundations. And at the bottom layer, so if you picture a pyramid and you just think of the stuff that actually meets the sand at the very bottom, then you need to make sure that that foundation is really strong, level, straight. That is songwriting. And you can't actually move on to the production process until you finish that songwriting process. And also, how wide that foundation is representative of how good of a song you've written. So the better song you write, the wider, more strong foundation you have to build from. After that, you moved on to the production process. The production process is almost equally as important as the songwriting process, but just slightly less so. We're kind of moving in this kind of triangular direction, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you will, if that means anything to you. So then, and then you have the recording process. The recording process, again, is just fulfilling the bottom layers. So the song was fulfilled in the production process. The production process is finalized in the recording process, but you can't essentially make a song better than it is by recording it better. So a bad song will still be a bad song even if it's well recorded. So the potential of that song is already set in stone, if you will, pardon the pun, at the foundation level. And then you move up these levels, and then you have mixing, and then you have mastering is just the very, very pinnacle of the music production process. So as we're walking through this, we are going to be starting on the bottom layer and then moving up. I want to keep this in mind that the most important part of the process is the songwriting process. If you write a banger song, it doesn't matter what your snare sounds like in the recording process, it's still going to be a banger, okay? So make sure that you're investing heavily into the beginning of the process, especially if you're doing it all yourself. Make sure you're investing first in the song itself, songwriting process, and then you move on to the next stages. Not to minimize the importance of those other stages, because they are still important, but they can't provide more potential for the song than was already established in the previous step, which is why our foundation is widest at the bottom and most narrow at the top. So you can ruin a song with recording, but you can't make a song with recording.
Ooh, fire right there.
Let's dive into writing a song. What is a song? How do we write one? What's the deal?
100%. Yeah. Okay. And so I think the power of this podcast too, as I'm going through and as we're both just kind of talking about this stuff, is that it has the specific nuance of you are doing all of this yourself in your home. Right? So if you want, not to say that if you just want to be a pro songwriter or you just want to write songs for other people or you just want to produce, not to say you're not going to get some value, because I think you absolutely will. It can help to understand the other parts of the process to help you do your part better. Really, the big kind of target that we're talking to, people trying to do all of this. And the benefit of doing it all of yourself is you get to control 100%. You don't have to let someone else mess with something. You don't have to worry going back and forth. Like Tyson was saying, even the speed at which you can create is just incredible, right? But there are some cons here. Because you're wearing all of the hats, this means it can be hard to juggle the different parts of the process. And sometimes you might have your mixing engineer hat on when you should have your artist hat on, where you're recording your vocals and you're caring about a good performance, right? If you start to get too nuanced with putting your engineer hat on, right, you're going to be like confusing yourself. And so anyway, all that to say, there can be some friction there, even though you're wearing your hats. So as we go through this, take out what you feel is useful for you. But when it comes to a song, right, what is a song? I just like to think a song is a story. That simple. And hey, if you want to go nerd out and find like the deep, crazy theory, song theory, and like all this, go for it. Like all that's on YouTube. Just check out what like Berkeley on YouTube or something, right? That's not how I talk. That's not how I'm going to communicate. I'm like an artist first, and just like I'm going to be speaking from having just done this. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to be getting teacher mode. All right. So a song, I just think it's a story, and I think it's super simple. We tell that story through the use of our lyrics, right? It's just words. The difference between the pages in a book and the words in a song, right, is we're able to communicate those lyrics through this thing called melody. Right? Melody is kind of the vehicle, so to speak, to let these words land with somebody and to let these words mean something to somebody, right? So if think about like slam poetry is super cool, or just talking can be super impactful, but there's something magical that happens when the very words you're saying have a specific rhythm and cadence to them, and they are hitting certain notes in conjunction with music that you're creating. Melody is kind of that big thing I think that gives a lot of people trouble, even on like, my own YouTube channel and stuff, and just talking with a lot of you guys. Like melody is a big deal, and I understand that because it's probably the most confusing, weirdest, most vulnerable thing. It's just weird. Like, how do you come up with melodies? How do you figure this stuff out? And how do you write melodies that fit the words well? Or like, how do you write lyrics that fit the melody well? Because sometimes you could have a lyric idea that's just fire, but you can't for the life of you just figure out what melody would support that. How can you even sing that? You might have a melody that's just amazing, but you kind of fall in love with your own gibberish when you made the melody and you can't figure out what words to plug in. So hey, that's a big conversation, and we don't have all day to talk about this stuff here. But at its core, a song, I just think, is a story, and you're telling that story through lyrics and melody.
When we're talking about music being a story or a song being a story, the point of that story is to draw people into the story and experience it with you. Have an emotional response to that story. Humans love stories, right? why do we love Harry Potter? It's because it's a compelling story, and there's lots of little tiny stories inside of the major story of Harry Potter versus Lord Voldemort. So there's all of this intuition that goes into stories, but also there's similar frameworks that you can actually use to create a more compelling story than a less compelling story. So Nathan, do you want to dive into what actually creates a compelling story with the goal in mind of eliciting an emotional response from our listeners?
Yeah, totally. So I think, telling a good story, you could even just think about the main elements of like a novel or like a book or like you just said, like a movie or something, right? Like you can find the stuff out there. It's not hard to track down, but there's like a character, right? And they want something, right? In order to get that thing, there's like some stakes that are at play, like what's going to happen if they get it, what's going to happen if they don't get it. Maybe they meet someone that helps them get it, right? So there's all these different elements in a story that you can totally go look up and find that. So I think that those elements work because they're tried and true. You know what I mean? Like they show their heads in like every big story, and everything that elicits some emotion is there's got to be somebody, right? There's got to be some character. So when it comes to a song, I kind of like to think of like a simple three-part process of like, okay, in this song, who's talking, right? That's the character, right? Who's talking? Who are they talking to? And then what are they talking about? Who's talking to who about what? And I think that powerful framework has helped me steer clear from trying to just like total writer's block and perfectionism, trying to figure out, if I need the correct analogy in this verse, or like, this pre-chorus lacks a certain bit of illustration, or I'm not rhyming in my chorus, like, I don't know, like we can get it down super, I think, stupid rabbit holes. Are you kidding me? You're not writing a song because you can't figure out what rhymes with shark? That doesn't matter as much as just, hey, who's talking, who are they talking to, and what are they talking about? And within those three, you can set up a character who wants something, and there's something that happened, right? And then there's like a dip and a climax. You can cover all of that through those 3 points. What do you think, Tyson, about that? Like when it comes to the elements of a story and specifically songwriting?
Definitely agree. I think the most important thing is making it clear. So one issue that I find in a lot of beginner songwriters or just songs that are just too much, they are too much. They try to put too many details or too many plots inside of a single song. So the best songs are also some of the most simple songs because they're, you only have so many words to communicate what you're trying to communicate. You have so much repetition that, again, that even cuts down the words even more. I think there was a study done, and I didn't actually look this up before, but it just occurred to me that there was a study done on the average amount of words in a song. Oh. And for the modern pop song, it was less 120 words, I want to say.
Wow.
The average was less than that. It's an incredible challenge to be able to communicate something meaningful in so few words. It's not like a novel or a movie where we have an hour and a half minimum to be able to explain ourselves and explain the story and have other stories intertwined within the main storyline, right? That is like a skill unto itself, but it's also a skill to being able to drive that down to its most simple components to be able to communicate that effectively. If you decide to have too many stories inside of one song, people won't understand it. They're just going to be completely lost. They're like, what is this song about? I thought it was about this character who was having a breakup with this person, but now there's like this third person who's his best friend who betrayed him somehow. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm completely lost. Like, you just can't communicate that in a song. If you run into situations like that, write multiple songs. One song about each situation specifically, and also put in as much detail about that one situation as possible. I like to use the song The Middle by Zed. Listen to that song and think about what's actually happening in that whole song. It is a single moment that is explored in many different facets. It's talking about essentially where they were and then now where they are now, like why they can't just meet in the middle, even though the relationship seems to be, not very healthy because there's broken dishes all over the kitchen. But setting that aside, the personal issues probably that are going on inside of that song, and the drama. But it's a very compelling song because we understand, okay, they are basically in the middle of a breakup. And that's the moment. Like, they don't actually break up in the song. It's just they're in the middle of
It's
a breakup.
happening. Yeah.
It's happening right in that moment. And then you can feel that. You can put yourself into that story because everybody's been there. Like, everybody's experienced some sort of heartbreak or something that was going really well, and then it's all of a sudden like not going well all of a sudden. That is the power of simplicity in your songwriting, and also hyper focusing on that one moment in the story where it still builds those stakes essentially of who is it, who are they talking to, and about what. But those stakes are in the ground, and then we can explore within that a single moment of that story.
Huge. And I think tactically, so okay, what do we do with this as songwriters? Here's my biggest tip that I would give, and I started doing this a couple of years ago, and it's changed everything. Write the chorus first. Write the chorus first. Again, hey, this podcast, we're trying to help you professionally with your music because you want to take it seriously with this music you're making in your bedroom. You want to turn it into songs that stream, book shows, do stuff like that, right? So that's kind of how I'm going to talk, right? But if that's what you're pursuing, write your chorus first. Here's why. Because your chorus is going to help you hone in on what the heck the song is about. So everything that Tyson was just saying, right, of like trying to figure it out, if you start with a verse, it's so much easier to let that verse veer off into multiple storylines because there's nothing containing it. If you think about the chorus, right, it's the great sum up of your song. Like, it's the thing. I mean, it's repeated 3 or 4 times, right? And like a typical song, it's very important. And so whatever that messaging is, that can be your anchor for the rest of your song. So your verses, bridges don't have a chance to kind of veer off and not make sense, because as long as what's happening in the verse, you can trace it back to the chorus and it makes sense, then you're good. It's kind of like a good litmus test, right? To be like, okay, yep, this makes sense. We're still good. Awesome. So a tactical thing you can do, and I would advise you do, is to start with the chorus. And it has the added benefit of speeding up your writing process. Because if you write the chorus first and you got that thing set, you've literally written at least 50% of your song. Why? Because it's repeated 3 or 4 times, usually, right? So like, if you start there, not only are you ensuring that you're anchored, tethered to reality with your song, what the story is, you've got the great sum up that you can link everything back to, and you're already halfway home with lyrics, and melody for that matter too. So I don't know what you think about that, Tyson, but I feel like that could be really helpful.
I always give the same exact advice to anybody who's like starting to write songs or is interested in writing a song, or is just like working on their next project. One tactic that I like to do, so I'm releasing an EP early next year, or actually it might actually be out by the time this episode airs, but so in 2024 I have a project coming out. To write that project, I actually wrote choruses. I wrote 68 choruses and then chose the best ones to then flesh out into full songs. That way I'm basically able to edit as I go. I don't have to produce every single song I write, and then I also am just writing choruses, so I can pump out a chorus every 15 minutes. So I can write a ton of them very rapidly and then have a lot of material to then work from and ensure that I'm only picking the best stuff out of my brain that is actually worth writing about.
Worth pursuing.
And then in addition to that, once I have a chorus, then it makes the verses just easier to write, because you, kind of like Nathan was saying, you know exactly where it's headed, you know where to tie it back into, and then you can think just more objectively and just set yourself away from the paper for a minute and look at the chorus, and you're like, okay, what details do I need to add to this song to make that chorus make sense?
Yes.
And it's that simple. You just have to take a step back from your art for a minute and think about what is going to serve this song the best way possible, and it makes the verse that much easier to write. One of the songs, actually the lead single, which is going to be the lead single for this project, I rewrote the verses 3 times because they didn't make sense. And so don't be afraid to just edit your song along the way as well. Try to make sure that you know exactly what that chorus is, and then rewrite the verses until the verses make sense with the chorus and you're happy with how the song flows.
It's massive. And I think too that and I say this with love because there's parts of me that have been this for sure, but if you are an artsy artist, and I just mean you're someone that really cares about the art, you don't have too much of the business mindset, and you could care less about the business mindset, right? You care about the art and it being what you want it to be. Hey, I feel you, and I'm literally not coming down on you. I'm just saying, if that's you, but you're wanting to try to take this music thing seriously and get your music heard by people, the chorus is going to be the place where you want it to be universally known, where people could quickly find themselves in that story, and then save your artsy details, illustrations, all that kind of stuff for the verses. Verses are great place for those details and the imagery and stuff like that. So if you want to go nerd out, do more of that in the verses after having already written your chorus, like Tyson is saying, based in simplicity. It's quickly recognizable, because then you can still get a chance to flex kind of both of those. I know I was struggling with that for a while. It was like I would always start with a verse, and I would get super deep in my verse with all these details and stuff that I would get crippled by the time the chorus came, because I'd be like, I feel like I already covered a lot. You know what I mean? Like I already gave so much information here. Like I don't even know where to go. So give yourself a place to go, then fill it in with all the stuff that you enjoy about getting in the trenches with lyrics and storytelling and stuff.
Yeah, so one more thing to add on to that songwriting process. I think this is the last point we have before we move on. We'll move on to producing here in just a second. But the one last part of the puzzle that we want to add in here is to make sure that you're not writing like somebody else. So a lot of us, especially artists, right, when we first start, we have our artists that we look up to, and those are the titans in the industry or whatever. Yeah. And we want to write songs like them. But in reality, you have your own unique experience, your own unique voice. So don't try to write a song that sounds like somebody else. Write a song that sounds like you. And I think this takes a little bit of maturity too, because sometimes we don't think our voice has a reason to be heard. And we kind of have this like almost self-worth issue that plays into this. But at the end of the day, your voice does matter, and make sure that you're writing songs that fit your voice. I made this mistake many times trying to write songs that sound like somebody else. One of my favorite projects was actually one of my earliest projects where I did write it and I didn't have any specific influences in mind. I was just writing what I thought sounded good. And that was actually better than my next two projects, because the projects after that, I was trying to be somebody else that I actually wasn't. So make sure that you are able to be objective enough, but also accepting of yourself enough to then write songs that sound like you rather than somebody else. Don't try to just rip off somebody else and say, I want to be this person, because it never works. You will sound inauthentic, and people pick up on that stuff lightning fast, especially nowadays.
Huge. I love that you said that. That's great. Enjoy the fact that you have these artists that you want to be like. Awesome. Like we all have role models, inspiration. And if that's what gets you off the bench in making things, freaking sweet. But like Tyson said, you can't sustain that. I mean, otherwise you're never actually going to find your sound, right? And we all do actually have our own sound, but it takes time to figure that out. So that was a good point. And we spent so much time here, right, Tyson, on songwriting, because as you said, at the pyramid, it's the biggest part. It's the foundation. So it's like, I think it was worth giving it this amount of time for people.
So just to wrap up the songwriting portion here, just to kind of take away what you should be doing here to make sure it's extra clear is that when you're writing a song, focus on one story. You have who are you talking about, to whom, and about what. Those are the three pillars of your song. In your song, make it as simplistic as possible without losing its meaning. So make sure you focus on one moment and explore that moment as deeply as possible within the story that you've chosen. And then after that, write the chorus first to ensure that you know exactly where the song is headed, and you can tie everything back to that one central theme and idea of your chorus. And then ultimately, don't try to sound like other people, sound like yourself. All right, so moving on to production. Nathan, what is production so we have our song, we've written it, we have a chorus, we have some verses that make sense to our chorus. Yeah. But now I need to actually like do something with this song. What do I do next?
Yeah. Okay. Love it. So production is like, it's such a buzzword now, dude. It's like such a buzzword that I think nobody really knows what it is, or we've just forgotten what it is. Tyson and I, both our styles is just try to cut through the noise and just give it to you straight. So here's how I would describe production, right? If you came to me like, Nathan, hey, I got my song written. Awesome. Okay, but now I want to produce. What do? I would just say, riffing off the fact that, believe that a song is a story and the story is very important. The story drives the song. All production does is going to reinforce what's going on in the story. It's going to reinforce what's going on in the story. Now, you can do that in a bunch of different ways, hence all of the plugins, all of the effects, all of the sample packs, all the MIDI instruments, all the stuff, right? You can go about that in 100 different ways. But I believe at its core, it's what are you choosing to add to the song? What are you choosing to layer into the song to reinforce the story that's happening? Because my philosophy has had to change, okay? I would let production get in the way of the song, when in the reality, you've got your song written, production almost needs to feel effortless. oh, it just makes sense. Almost like nothing is sticking out too much because I wanted to get out of the way of the song, right? I don't care about the melody. I care about the lyric. I care about the story. The thing that I like to tell people when it comes to production is that no amount of production is going to save a poorly written song. I mean, think about this, right? Like, the term polished turd might be accurate and appropriate here. But like, I'm sure we've all heard those songs where we're like, why is this on the radio? Come on, haven't we all said that at least once, especially as artists? We're like, I write better than that. My stuff's better than this. Why is that on the radio? Right? And maybe that's a whole separate thing, but the fact remains, right? Like, you reacted like that because it probably sounds good. I mean, hey, it was mixed and mastered well enough to get on the radio. It's got some cool production and stuff in there, but you're stuck on the fact that it's not hitting you, or that it feels unauthentic, or that it feels phony or fake. Like, whatever your reasoning is for your beef with the song, it's not meaningful enough. You know, like, it sticks out to you because all the cool production and how fancy it sounds just can't hide the fact that it was a bad song to begin with. It just was a bad song. So when it comes to production, again, with this theme of simplicity, I think you keep it simple and you don't really add production unless it's needed. You know, like just whatever's going to serve the song best. What do you think, Tyson? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. So I've definitely been there and made that mistake of trying to overproduce songs. Mm-hmm. So I view myself as a producer first and a songwriter second. So I love production. I love being able to like create that soundscape behind the melody. And that is really where I feel my skill set shines, but to the detriment of sometimes the song, because I want to do so many cool things with the production. I then let the song kind of take a back seat and the story of the song take a back seat. And so instead of just trying to make it like a cool sounding song, I instead trying to pull myself back a little bit on the whole production front and really think about what is going to serve this song the best. I don't think that you can really get away from that, and there's no other simpler way to describe production as the minimum amount of elements to make the song whole and no more. That's the issue. Most of us want to do more because especially once we like learn how to use our DAW and learn how to do all these like fancy techniques, we're like, I want an infinite delay that goes through the entire song and is like tying everything together through the production. But you're like, you don't need that.
Or you like, I remember for me, like I fell in love with reverb. I mean, I still kind of, you know, we have a history, reverb and I do, but like, you know, fell in love with reverb so much. I'm like, I'm putting this on everything. So like, you know, on the drums, on the synths, on the it's just like, so my track is just one, it just sounds like it's playing in a cathedral, you know. It's like but I think the key there, right, is like there's an analogy that I like to use. It's like a cake, you know, like a birthday cake or something. You've got the candles on there, fancy decorations, and like, you know, it can look really pretty right from the top, but the reality is the icing and the decorations and the candles, they only make up like what, 20% of the cake or something. You know, the thickest part of the cake is that, you know, is the bottom layer. It's where like, and that's where a lot of the flavor is. I mean, think about it. If the cake was just icing, sprinkles, whipped cream, and candles, and you just ate that, I mean, you'd throw up, right? Like, you'd feel sick. You need to balance that with the substance of, you know, the nice, spongy, dense part of the cake. So for me, that's kind of how I've had to learn to view production, is that, oh, okay, production is, it's the candles, it's the sprinkles, it's the whipped cream, it's the stuff on top that can help add to the cake, but really the song, the story, the melody, the lyric, that's the dense part. That's actually what's carrying the most weight of the song, just to help free you. You know, if you're like, oh man, I need to figure out parallel compression. I remember that. I was like, parallel compression. It's like, dude, that's a candle. That is literally, how about like tweak the chorus melody? You know, like, so when we're talking about like return on our time, right? If we return for the biggest part of our song, chasing the cool hack or whatever, like maybe there's a place for that, or save that for experimentation, or like, yeah, go for it, figure it out, but just don't lose sight. Don't mistake a candle for the cake. You know what I mean? Like, keep the cake the cake. So focus on the things that really carry the most weight there.
Nathan, do you know how to fix a bad snare sound?
How?
Have a good song. It's a common analogy though, but so true. Like, it doesn't matter what your snare sounds like if your song sucks.
Yes.
That's just the truth. But if you have a good song, then it still doesn't matter what your snare sounds like, because it's a good song.
Because it's a good song. Oh my goodness, I love that. That's it.
Obviously, production is still important, but don't give it more credit and more weight than it's due.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, everything that Nathan just said is correct. So go back, rewind, listen to that, because ultimately you can't fix a bad song with production.
All right, so assuming we've got a solid song, we're working up that pyramid, right? And we've got production that isn't getting in the way of the song. It's like making room and it's supporting it. And we're like, wow, okay, this track is like, this is sick, right? We're kind of moving into your territory here, Tyson, dominantly with your expertise, right? So like we're getting into recording now, right? That's going to come up next. So do you want to kind of, I don't know, baby step us through that process?
Sure. I'm gonna start this with a quick story. So back in 2015, 16, something like that. Let's just say it's 2015.
Back in the day. Yeah.
There was a guy who's in a band in LA, and he decided we need some songs for our band. So he started writing some songs, and he wrote this one song for his band. They had, played it a couple times, and they're like, yeah, this is a great song, let's use it. And then all of a sudden his sister had heard the song, and then she started kind of like humming it. She's like, oh, this is a cool song. So then he realizes, though, over, course of a couple days, that I think this song would be better fit for my sister. Takes the song away from his band and then gives it to his sister, has his sister record it, and he used all of just the stock stuff inside of Logic. He, had his home studio. He was using his MacBook Pro. He was using Logic. He used all the VSTs, all the, sample instruments inside of Logic. And then he had his Focusrite 2i2, and then he had a $400 condenser microphone to record his sister. So total, he had $600 worth of gear that he used to produce this song. He then has his sister record it. He mixes it, masters it, again, using only stock Logic options, uploads it to SoundCloud. That song got over 200 million streams on SoundCloud over the coming year or so. It just blew up overnight. It was everywhere. And that song is Ocean Eyes by Billie Eilish. Her brother Phineas actually wrote the song and gave it to her. This kind of proves the point for coming back to recording. All he had was one condenser microphone and a DAW, and that's it. So he had his Logic Pro 10 and a condenser microphone to create a song that produced 200 million streams on SoundCloud, let alone everything that it's done afterwards on Spotify and all the other streaming platforms. Why I love this story so much is not because I love Billie Eilish. Honestly, I could kind of care less about Billie Eilish. But the important thing, if you're sitting here complaining, I don't have name your microphone to record, and that's why my song isn't good enough, how do you explain Phineas and Billie in their bedroom with their $400 microphone recording a song that has international recognition now? I would really challenge anybody who has ever said, let's wait to record this until I have X piece of gear. Really, you're probably just making excuses. I've been here. I made excuses and refused to record something until I had a very specific piece of gear. Did that piece of gear make my recording any better? No, it did not. Because most of the time I had no clue how to use that piece of gear properly. So let's just put it out there. Being honest here, I bought gear that I didn't need, didn't know how to use, and ultimately probably made my record worse than better because I didn't know how to use that gear properly. So we had to have this conversation about gear. So I hopefully you took something away from this, that the gear is actually holding you back if you don't have it. The gear you have is the best gear to use, always. And so whatever you have right now, that is what you have to produce your song. And ultimately, sometimes those limitations actually increase the value of your song because it creates, you increase your creativity because you have those limitations. Don't let the gear hold you back. That being said, how do you record stuff? Breaking it down to the simplest way is record simply. Don't get fancy with your recording. If you're going to record a voice, just set up your condenser microphone, put your pop filter in front of it, and record your vocal. Don't let it clip. Don't let it be too quiet. Somewhere sweet in the middle, and you're good to go. Those are the rules that I have for you for recording. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but we don't have time in this episode to really dive into those more specifics. But at the same time, just keep it as simple as possible. Go direct in with your guitars. Go direct in with your bass guitar. There's tons of amp sims that sound amazing nowadays. Even really the stock Logic ones sound great. So just find one that sounds good and that fits the vibe that you want, and then go with it. Like, don't overthink this too much, because ultimately, stated again and again in this episode, the song is the most important thing. Then the production is the next most important thing. Then the recording is the next most important thing. Yes. So we're growing on this ladder of the higher we go on this ladder, the less important each step is. There we go.
Yeah, 100%. I love what you said too about limitations. Limitations breed creativity. You know, I think that if, I don't know, I have this weird thing. As much as I'd love to get the latest Apple computer that's like the studio and it's pimped out and like it could handle 500 VST tracks in Logic, or something crazy. As much as I'd love that, I don't know. I like the idea of having limitations and not being able to do anything and everything I want at the drop of a hat. I think there's something to be said for limitations giving you creativity. You have to figure out a way around or over or under where you can't just have it like that. And so maybe you don't need to be rocking a super old computer just until it dies. I don't know. I'm just trying to say, like, it's okay. It's just okay to not have the best, the biggest, the brightest like setup, because it just might paralyze you, because you can do anything and everything, and you have every single sound, every single library, every single instrument, all the micro, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like too much, you're too fancy. I think there's something to keep that bedroom mentality, literally like with Phineas and like Billie Eilish, right? The bedroom mentality of, okay, this is what I have, and I'm going to like learn it like the back of my hand, and I'm going to figure out how to make the sound that I hear in my head. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to figure it out. And there's something to be said for that kind of, it just helps you come up with new ideas, right? It helps you come up with new stuff. And I've seen that time and time again for me personally. I'm sure you have too, Tyson. And so if there's someone out there who's feeling bummed because they need gear, they need better gear to make better music, and I would argue it starts with you. So I would listen to everything Tyson just said. I love how simple your answer was. Just stand in front of the mic. Don't get in the red zone, right? Don't get it too quiet, and just do it. Because there's more, okay? But to an extent, that's the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, and I think I would add on to that. The more gear you have, the more you're going to get in your own way of recording well, because you're going to be focused on just like the sonic quality rather than the vibe of the song. Vibe, as ethereal as it is way more important than just straight up quality. We've all heard those tracks that sound, the sonic quality is excellent,
impeccable,
but it's just a bad song.
Yeah.
And then we've also heard those songs are not well recorded. Listen back to the 90s, 80s, 70s. There's lots of hit songs that are poorly recorded, but they're still hit songs because they have great vibe. As much as I am a super analytical, very, scientific approach to all of my music, at the end of the day, that stuff is important and you cannot ignore it. So just because you have a technically proficiently correct song or sound or recording does not mean that's a good song or good recording.
Huge.
And just using a quick example here, if I have 4 different vocal microphones I have access to, and I sit there and I test each single one, I'm going to be changing my focus from just performing the song well to which vocal mic has the best tonal quality. When in reality, my performance that I give that microphone is 100 times more important than the capture on the back end. 100%. So make sure that you're focusing on performance rather than just recording techniques. There's some value in having somebody else record you for that very reason, because I'm a notorious one-man band when it comes to my own music, right? I don't have anybody touch my music except for me, other than just feedback, but nobody actually cuts any piece of audio inside of my entire session because it's inconvenient, really. That's the true reason. But also, at the end of the day, it's sometimes a hindrance to me, because when I'm recording my vocal, I'm worried about making sure that the actual input signal is correct, or that my mic placement is good, and all of that, other technical stuff. And then I sometimes just forget to just perform the song like I really feel it inside. And so I'm just thinking more technical. I'm on that headspace of just technical level rather than just feeling the art. Ultimately, I would get a better recording if I just focused on the performance. So that cannot be overstated, only understated. So I would just think about that when you're recording. Keep things simple. Don't get a lot of gear, and ultimately focus on the performance, the input to all of this stuff, rather than the process that it goes through.
Nothing to follow up with that. That's literally it. Rewatch that 7 times. I just think if this is an episode you need to like re-listen to or re-listen to a certain part of it, just do it. Seriously, like just do it, because all of these different parts do require a different hat. And if you're trying to do all this yourself, it just might be good to get, some perspective on what your role is in the moment. And I think the biggest thing, but it's so easy to let these different roles get in the way of just creating the song and just making, right? So you need to know when to take off the hats and when to put the right ones on. And so, yeah, I just think if there's any part of this you need to re-listen to, just do it, like for real. And we're going to keep going through. We stopped recording today, but we're going to be picking up here in the next episode, going through the rest of the process. So
once you make it through this process, right, you've written your song, you've produced your song, you've recorded your song, and now you're ready to move on to the rest of the process, then I would encourage you to go to promixformula.com and pick up a free course that I've created to help you finish your song like a pro. This covers all of the fundamental techniques and underlying principles that you absolutely need to produce pro level songs on the back end. So again, we've made it all the way through production in this. This is the next step for you of going in, mixing and mastering your song so it sounds professional. So you can get that at, again, the promixformula.com. You can either go thepromixformula.com or promixformula.com. Either one will bring you to the same page where you can get access to that free course. I think there's about 12 videos or something, about an hour and a half. Just set the time aside, actually engage with it, and then go and implement it in your mixes. I've received amazing feedback on how helpful this is for people, especially when you're just getting started. I start at the very basics of what you actually need to focus on to get a pro mix, because it can get really complicated, really technical, really fast, and I don't want you to get stuck in that mindset. I want you to really focus on the fundamentals that are going to give you real results rather than focusing on parallel compression, because ultimately it doesn't matter nearly as much as getting your fundamentals correct. So all of that inside the Pro Mix Formula course, which you can access through Pro Mix Formula, and it's also completely free to access. So I'm not charging you anything for this, but I hope that you do take it and implement it and get awesome results from it. Thanks for tuning in. One last thing before we sign off is make sure you're leaving a review for us to let us know what type of content you want us to create. Anything inside of this episode, we are more than happy to dive deeper into creating melodies, writing better lyrics, producing what better, like dive into anything very deep. We have the expertise here on hand to be able to do so. So let us know what you want us to cover in more detail, and we'll make sure that we schedule that for a future episode. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Oh, yeah.